For thousands of years, California existed unknown by the civilizations of Europe. Only native peoples lived in her valleys, swam in her ocean and rivers, and lived off her bounty. Beginning in the 1770s, however, while General Washington was leading rebels in the American Revolution, another revolution began in Alta California when Father Junipero Serra and the Spanish Franciscan monks celebrated Mass at Monterey for the first time. Prehistoric California had ended, and modern California began to work her way through Spanish, Mexican, Californio, and eventually American rule with the discovery of gold in 1848. Along the way there would be floods, fires, earthquakes, masses, and murders, all worked to shape the priests, soldiers, and natives as cultures collided. These are the stories of the California missions. On Sunday, July 16, 1769, Father Junipero Serra, Juan Vizcaino, and Fernando Perron raised and blessed a Spanish cross to establish Alta California's first mission. The mission is named for Catholic saint Didacus of Alcala, and you can find a statue of him near the front of the mission.
We are very patient to get this shot. The ceiling, San Diego.
There is also a painting of him under the yellow and red canopy, which denotes that Mission San Diego is a Catholic basilica.
Basilica, so the umbrella's got the papal colors on it.
Over the altar is a rare, old-world representation of God the Father. In present-day Catholic churches, only Christ is depicted. Just below, you will find a representation of the crucified Christ. This corpus of Christ is of Spanish origin and from the 17th century. His missing arms serve to remind us that we are to be the arms of Christ in the world. Mission San Diego was originally established 6 miles west of its current location. It was relocated in 1774 to be closer to a water source and the native population of Kumeyaay people. The present buildings are from 1813, and the facade we see today was rebuilt in the 1930s to recreate the exterior. Mission San Diego is the site of many of California's firsts. The first vineyards in California were planted at the mission in 1769 by Father Serra, and by 1781, wine was being produced at the mission. It is where the first baptism in California was performed, and it is also the site of the first Christian burial in California.
Here is the chapel, San Diego.
Today, baptisms are often observed in the La Capilla Chapel. It houses the choir stalls, altar table, and celebrants' chairs dating to the 1400s. They were a gift to the mission and imported from Spain. Mission San Diego was also the site of the first public execution in California in 1778. In 1775, there was an uprising by 800 natives, and they burned the church to the ground. You can still see foundations of the original 1806 convento buildings at the mission. In the uprising, the mission's blacksmith was killed, 2 children, associate pastor Father Vicente Fuster, and Father Luis Jaime, who became California's first martyr.
Here we are, San Diego de Alcala.
At the church is this white cross, a burial marker for Father Jaime. His remains are entombed beneath the chancel floor. In 1776, Father Serra returned to oversee the rebuilding of the church.
And that is what San Diego used to look like.
Mission San Diego is noted for its 46-foot-high campanario, or bell wall. The bell on the lower right is named Ave Maria Purissima, Immaculate Mary. It weighs 805 pounds and was cast in 1802. The bell on the lower left is called Mater Dolorosa, Our Lady of Sorrows. It weighs 1,200 pounds and was recast by the Standard Ironworks of San Diego in 1895 from bell fragments found in the vicinity of the mission. The sign explaining the campanario states, "The bells played an important role in everyday life of the mission. They were used to announce times for Mass, work, meals, and siestas. The bells signaled danger, rang solemnly to honor the dead, and pealed joyously to celebrate feast days, weddings, and fiestas."
Casa de los Padres.
Casa de los Padres is one of the only intact sections of the mission. It was most likely the original living quarters of the Padres and has been furnished as if it were one of the Padres' cells. In 1834, the mission was secularized by the Mexican government. On June 8, 1846, the mission was given to Santiago Arguello by Governor Pio Pico, quote, for services rendered to the government. The mission was used by the United States Cavalry from 1850 to 1857, and the buildings fell into disrepair. In 1862, President Lincoln signed a proclamation that restored ownership of the missions to the Roman Catholic Church. The Catholic Daughters of America were instrumental in the restoration of the buildings in the 1930s. Today, the mission has a museum which traces the history of the area from the time before the Franciscan missionaries through the restoration of the mission in the 1930s. There are many displays and artifacts depicting the history of this, California's first mission. Be sure to exit through the gift shop.
San Diego.
Mission San Carlos Borromeo de Carmelo, or Carmel Mission, was founded June 3, 1770, by Father Junipero Serra and was his favorite of all the missions. It is named after St. Charles Borromeo, the 16th century Archbishop of Milan. Before the mission, the Aselan and Rumsen tribes lived where Mission Carmel now stands, but it is hard to find mention or images of them. Unless, of course, you go to the graveyard.
The graveyard of Carmel? 4,000 unmarked Indian graves are supposed to be in here. Like the abalone shells.
Father Serra died at the mission in 1784. He is buried here, and his remains have been exhumed 4 times and removed for examination for sainthood. This stole was taken from his grave by Father Angelo Casanova on January 14, 1882. The right side of the stole is missing because it was cut into small pieces to be given to those in attendance for the public viewing of Father Serra's body. The stole is around Father Serra's neck when he was buried August 29, 1784. The garden at Mission Carmel commemorates the 200th anniversary of Father Serra's death.
All right. Carmel Mission.
Originally, the mission in Carmel was made of adobe, but Father Lawson built a stone one to replace it for Father Serra's last wish in 1797. Father Lawson is also buried at Carmel Mission. Mission Carmel was the center of activity for Father Serra and the headquarters of the mission system from 1770 to 1803. As a result, the mission holds many artifacts. Father Serra oversaw the planning of each mission from Carmel and established 9 of California's 21 missions.
There's the pipe organ in Carmel. What a pair of Sarahs. Could play you some party music. Christ the King.
This stole was worn by Father Serra in the 1770s.
Father Junipero Serra's cell. Carmel Mission. Not much to see.
Father Serra's austere lifestyle while living at Mission Carmel did not follow him into death. Mission Carmel is home to the Father Serra Memorial Cenotaph. A cenotaph is a monument to a person buried elsewhere. At Mission Carmel, that elsewhere is only a few feet away near the church's altar. The Serra cenotaph is made from locally quarried travertine marble and bronze. A life-size statue of Father Serra lies on top. His bare feet are resting on a grizzly bear cub as a symbol of California. This panel depicts Father Serra accompanying Captain de Portola and a squadron of leather jacket soldiers. Below are neophytes and natives. At the head of the cenotaph is Father Juan Crespi praying over Father Serra. Father Lawson is at his feet with his arms crossed, and Father Julian Lopez, a friar at Mission Carmel who was only 35 when he died, also kneels. All 4 Spanish priests are buried under the church sanctuary. Each of these men were important to the California missions. Their treatment and death is a far cry from the mass graves for the native peoples we just saw outside. Father Serra founded the mission system. Father Crespi named the Santa Clara River Valley and accompanied Captain Gaspar de Portola when he discovered San Francisco Bay in 1769. And Father Lawson established the San Fernando Mission and many others. Carmel Mission is the site of California's first library, which had 30 books. Along with the rest, Carmel Mission was secularized by the Mexican government in 1834. The mission fell into disrepair and the land was sold. It was abandoned for 30 years with no roof. Ancient graffiti from that time can still be found on the mission's walls. By 1850, the mission was in ruins. President Abraham Lincoln played a key role in the return of the California missions to the Catholic Church, and in 1886, ownership was transferred to the Franciscans of the Diocese of Monterey. Restoration began in 1884, and the mission was made a minor basilica by Pope John XXIII in 1960. Father Serra was beatified by Pope John Paul II in 1988. He was canonized as a saint of the Catholic Church by Pope Francis in 2015. Today, Mission Carmel is one of the most popular and visited of all the missions, and rightly so. It was the seat of power during its day and boasts a museum filled with California history. Don't forget to exit through the gift shop. Mission San Antonio. Kind of in the building right there that I just was looking at, but Mission San Antonio de Padua, a mission of the Sierras, was the third mission established on July 14th, 1771 by Father Serra. The least visited mission, she told us when we got here. You can see why. It's in the middle of nowhere, this mission. In 1773, the mission was moved to a spot further up the Los Robles Valley where it now stands because of an unreliable water source at its original location. Mission San Antonio is the site of the first marriage recorded in California in 1773. The bride in California's first wedding was a Native American from the Salinan tribe. The Salinan and Aselan natives occupied this part of the San Joaquin Valley for thousands of years before any Spanish arrived. The mission sits at the westernmost of a series of volcanic peaks known as the Nine Sisters. Juan Cabrillo, one of the earliest European explorers, recorded in his ship's log in 1542 that he was met by native peoples paddling grass tule rafts made by the Salinans. By 1805, there were 1,300 neophytes living and working at the mission, and this painting beautifully depicts the three cultures that were then housed here: the Native Americans, the priests, and the Spanish soldiers. During the Spanish colonial period, Spain not only wanted to establish its own colonies, but also wanted to keep Russia from doing the same. Missions were built around quadrangles like this to make them more defensible. Soldiers were stationed at Mission San Antonio between 1771 and 1830. They were veteran frontiersmen, many having originally been recruited to accompany the Spanish priests through Baja California. Some were the offspring of mixed marriages, and many also married Native American women. The first marriage in California, which was just mentioned, was between Juan Maria Ruiz, one of the Soldado de Cuera, and Margarita de Corona, a native Salinan. Margarita was her baptized name after she graduated as a member of the mission's first baptism class in 1773. Of course, baptizing Native Americans and converting them to Catholicism was the main goal of the church and the Catholic priests.
San Antonio de Padua.
Construction of the church did not begin until 1810, but it was the first to use a red tile roof, which was both fireproof and waterproof. Saint Anthony of Padua is a patron saint of the mission and is at the center of the altar. Saint Anthony of Padua was from the order of Franciscan priests. He was known for his powerful sermons, thorough knowledge of Scripture, and an unwavering devotion to the poor and sick. He was canonized less than a year after his death in 1231 AD. All the statues on the altar are original to the mission. They are, left to right, Saint Bonaventura, Saint Michael Archangel, and Saint Francis of Assisi. On the left wall is a side altar to Mary, and on the right wall is a side altar to Saint Jose. San Antonio de Padua features an extensive collection of sheet music and antique musical instruments. The mission had its own orchestra, and some members even made their own instruments out of native California wood.
Welcome to the music room in the museum at Mission San Antonio de Padua. The music you've been hearing is the old El Cantico del Alba, the hymn of dawn that was sung by the mission families upon rising in the morning.
The great hand, which we just saw, is called a Guidonian hand. The concept, created in the 10th century, was to have people memorize pitches and positions on their hand. The teacher would then teach songs by pointing to different positions and have the singers sing the corresponding pitches. Padre Juan Bautista Sancho used this technique at the mission, and staves like this one helped him to teach the native singers Christian hymns. Neophytes did play and sing, but most of their time was spent tending to the mission's buildings, its livestock and crops, and the daily needs of its people, like here in the kitchen. In addition to domestic rooms like the kitchen, the mission also had a water-powered gristmill, a tannery, a weaving room, an iron shop, a carpenter's shop, a tile shop, and of course, it also had a stable. Mission San Miguel de Padua has the most complete mission-era water system in all of California. Much of that water was used to irrigate the mission's vineyard, which may have been the very first in California.
So all that wine industry in California all started here with the missions. We're actually upstairs in this room for this wine vat. You can imagine the wine coming down. They would use it for services. And here we are, down where that wine is aged. Ooh. And it's a lot cooler down here too.
Wine was used both in church and in the priest's private chapel. Neophytes would have served the priests in rooms like this one. The neophytes would have used pottery and perhaps even fine china like this. The once thriving mission was not to survive, however. By 1810, the number of neophytes was down from around 1,300 to only 178. After secularization in 1834, only 150 neophytes were left. In 1845, the mission was put up for sale by Governor Pio Pico, but no one bid for it. In 1863, after being abandoned for 30 years, the mission was returned to the Catholic Church and eventually restored by the Hearst Corporation. In 1928, Franciscan friars once again held services at the mission. No town ever grew up around Mission San Antonio, and it is the least visited of all the California missions due to its isolation. Mission San Antonio de Padua, a beautiful place rich with California history.